The doctors couldn't save the millionaire's wife who fainted in the restaurant. Linda was always a striking woman. Tall, with wavy brown hair and green eyes that seemed to see beyond what was in front of her. She was the wife of Robert, a successful businessman with an incalculable fortune. They lived in a luxurious mansion and had an adorable daughter named Emily. To the world, they seemed to have the perfect marriage. However, behind closed doors, the reality was quite different. It was a Friday night when everything changed. Linda and Robert decided to dine at one of the most sophisticated restaurants in the city, a place where tables were adorned with fresh flowers and live music created an enchanting atmosphere. Linda was radiant in a red dress that highlighted her natural beauty. Robert, as always, was impeccably dressed, but there was a coldness in his eyes that Linda knew well. Seated at a table near the window, they ordered the main course. Robert chose wine, an expensive red that he knew Linda loved. She took a sip, smiled, and then suddenly, her face turned pale. The glass slipped from her hand, spilling wine on the white tablecloth, and Linda collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Panic-stricken screams echoed through the restaurant. Robert stood, pretending to be shocked, while other patrons crowded around Linda. A young hostess, Julia, ran to help her. Julia was a simple girl with a fierce determination. Her black hair, tied back in a ponytail, swayed as she knelt beside Linda, trying to understand what was happening. "Call an ambulance," Julia shouted, trying to stay calm. The minutes that followed were a mix of chaos and oppressive silence. When the ambulance finally arrived, the paramedics worked quickly but couldn't revive Linda. Then, in a desperate act, Julia remembered an antidote she had studied in her nursing school days. She ran to the restaurant kitchen where she kept her first aid kit and returned with a small syringe. "You have to trust me," Julia said, kneeling beside Linda and injecting the antidote into her arm. For a moment that seemed eternal. Nothing happened. Then, miraculously, Linda began to breathe again. Her eyes slowly opened, confused but alive. The people around applauded, and Robert, who had been watching with an indecipherable expression, finally approached. "Linda, are you okay?" he asked, trying to sound concerned. Linda was too weak to respond. The paramedics quickly took her to the hospital where she received the necessary care. Julia went along, insisting she needed to ensure Linda was all right. While waiting at the hospital, Robert made a quick and discreet call to his lawyer, Henry. "We need to talk," Robert said, his voice low and urgent. "The plan failed." "Don't worry, Robert," Henry replied on the other end. "We'll fix this. Just stay calm." Julia, overhearing the conversation by chance, began to suspect something terrible. And so, on that fateful night, the fates of Linda and Julia intertwined, leading them on a path of discoveries and revelations that would change their lives forever. At the hospital, Linda was taken directly to the emergency room. While the doctors examined her, Julia waited anxiously in the waiting room, watching Robert with a mix of distrust and concern. He seemed unperturbed, his face a mask of forced calm. When the doctors finally emerged, they brought good news. Linda was out of danger. "She'll need some time to recover, but she'll be fine," said Dr. Smith, the head of the medical team. "It's a miracle she was revived so quickly." Robert thanked the doctor, but Julia couldn't help but notice the lack of genuine emotion in his eyes. She decided she needed to talk to Linda as soon as she was conscious. A few hours later, Linda was transferred to a private room. She was still weak but conscious. Julia entered the room and Linda smiled weakly when she saw her. You saved my life," Linda said, her voice hoarse. "I did what anyone would do," Julia replied humbly. "But I think we need to talk." Linda looked at Julia, confused. Before she could respond, Robert entered the room, his face again assuming a calculated expression of concern. "Linda, I'm so glad you're okay," he said, approaching the bed and holding her hand. Linda smiled, but there was something in her eyes that indicated distrust. Robert turned to Julia. "Thank you for everything you did," he said firmly. "Can we have a moment alone?" Julia nodded and left the room, but didn't go far. She stopped in the hallway, determined to hear what was happening. She took out her phone and pretended to be engrossed in it, but her ears were tuned to the conversation inside the room. "What happened, Robert?" Linda asked, her voice stronger now. "I remember drinking the wine and then... nothing." "I don't know, darling," Robert lied. "It must have been some kind of allergic reaction. We'll figure it out together." As Robert spoke, Julia felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Dr. Smith. "You seem worried," he said. Julia sighed and explained her suspicions to the doctor. He listened attentively and, in the end, agreed that something was odd about the situation. "We need to analyze what Linda ingested," Dr. Smith said. "If there's something wrong, we need to find out." Meanwhile, inside the room, Linda was trying to recall details, but everything was a blur. Robert continued to reassure her, but she felt a growing sense that something was very wrong. Finally, she fell asleep, exhausted. Outside, Dr. Smith and Julia were determined to uncover the truth. They collected samples of Linda's blood and sent them for analysis. The results revealed traces of a rare poison, something that could not have been ingested accidentally. "Julia, you were right," Dr. Smith said, showing the results. "We need to involve the authorities." Julia knew this meant putting herself in a dangerous position, but she was determined to help Linda. She called the police and explained the situation. Soon, investigators arrived at the hospital. Inside the room, Robert was surprised by the arrival of the police. "Mr. Robert, we need you to come with us," one of the investigators said. "There are suspicions of poisoning." Robert tried to protest but was taken into custody. Linda, waking up and seeing the scene, was devastated. But Julia entered the room and held her hand. "We'll find out the truth, Linda, and I'll be by your side to make sure justice is served." And so, the lives of Linda and Julia were about to change radically. The lies began to unravel, revealing dark secrets that would lead to a journey of pain, courage, and finally, redemption. With Robert in custody, the investigation into Linda's poisoning progressed rapidly. However, the true extent of the conspiracy was yet to be revealed. Linda, while physically recovering, was emotionally devastated. She locked herself in her thoughts, reliving moments from her marriage, trying to understand where everything started to fall apart. Julia became a constant presence by her side. The young hostess showed an empathy and strength that Linda did not expect, becoming not just an ally, but a friend. They spent hours talking, and Linda began to trust Julia completely. Meanwhile, Robert was being interrogated by the police. He denied all the charges, claiming the situation was a misunderstanding. However, the evidence against him was overwhelming. Intercepted conversations between Robert and his lawyer, Henry, revealed a detailed plan to poison Linda to avoid a divorce that would leave him with half his fortune. "Robert, you need to understand, this is our only way out," Henry had said in a recording. "If you divorce, Linda will take half of your assets, and your daughter will be under her custody. You can't allow that." "But poisoning her, Henry? That's too extreme," Robert had responded, his voice hesitant. "You know as well as I do that there's no other solution. With her out of the way, you'll have everything. We can make it look like an accident. No one will ever suspect." As investigators presented this evidence, Robert realized his fate was sealed. He was formally charged with attempted murder and conspiracy. Linda, upon being informed of the findings, felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief because the truth was finally coming out, but sadness because the man she had once loved had tried to kill her. "Julia, how could I have been so blind?" Linda asked, tears streaming down her face. "How did I not see who he really was?" "Don't blame yourself, Linda," Julia replied, holding her hand. "People like Robert know how to manipulate and deceive. The important thing is that you're alive and can start healing now." During this period, Linda began to reflect on what she wanted to do with her life moving forward. She didn't want the traumatic experience to define her. She wanted to find a way to turn her pain into something positive. Julia, always by her side, shared an idea that had occurred to her. "Linda, what if we used your experience to help other women?" Julia suggested. "Women who suffer in silence, who don't have a voice. We could create a nonprofit to support victims of domestic violence." The idea resonated deeply with Linda. She knew how much her own story could inspire and help other women. She decided this would be her new purpose. In time, Linda and Julia began working together to establish the nonprofit. They chose the name New Beginnings, symbolizing a fresh start for those who had suffered. They gathered a dedicated team and started offering psychological support, legal assistance, and a safe shelter for victims of violence. As the nonprofit took shape, Linda felt increasingly empowered. She turned her pain into action and her suffering into empathy. Every woman she helped was a reminder of her own struggle, but also a testament to her resilience. And so Linda and Julia not only built an organization, but also forged an unbreakable bond of friendship and solidarity. Together, they transformed their painful experiences into a powerful force for good, and New Beginnings became a beacon of hope for many women seeking a new life. With New Beginnings officially established, Linda and Julia began to see the fruits of their labor. The nonprofit quickly gained recognition for its dedication and unwavering support offered to victims of domestic violence. Women of all ages and backgrounds began seeking help, drawn by the promise of a fresh start and Linda's inspiring story. The first woman to seek refuge at New Beginnings was Anna, a young mother of two who had fled an abusive relationship. Linda and Julia welcomed her with open arms, offering a safe haven and emotional support. "You don't know how much this means to me and my children," Anna said, holding Linda and Julia's hands. "I was lost, but now I feel like we have a chance to start over." Anna's story was not unique. With every new woman who came to New Beginnings, Linda and Julia felt more motivated to expand their services. In time, they formed partnerships with lawyers, psychologists, and other professionals who volunteered to help. Meanwhile, Robert's case progressed through the courts. The evidence against him was overwhelming, and the media followed every detail of the trial. Henry, his lawyer, tried everything to discredit the evidence, but the recording of their conversations was decisive. "Mr. Robert, the court finds you guilty of attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder," declared the judge. "Your sentence will be announced soon, but it is certain that you will spend many years in prison." Robert listened to the sentence with a blank expression, knowing his life was ruined. Linda watched the trial with Julia by her side, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. She knew justice had been served, but she still had a long way to go in her emotional recovery. Determined to move forward, Linda focused even more on new beginnings. She decided to start a new project, a welcoming center that offered not just shelter, but also medical care, psychological support, and educational opportunities. The center was inaugurated with great expectation. The ceremony was attended by many of the women who had been helped by the nonprofit, who shared their moving stories. "This center is a symbol of our commitment to every woman who needs help," Linda said during the inauguration. "It is a place where hope is reborn, and where each of you can find the strength to start over." New Beginnings continued to grow, but the true triumph of Linda and Julia was in the transformation of the lives they touched. Each woman who found support and strength in the nonprofit was a living testament to the power of resilience and solidarity. And so, Linda and Julia's journey continued, marked by challenges but also many triumphs, as they continued to spread hope and inspiration wherever they went. With the success of the fundraising gala, New Beginnings saw an influx of new resources and opportunities. Linda and Julia worked tirelessly to ensure every penny was well spent. They decided to open new shelters in different parts of the city to reach more women in need. However, with growth came new challenges. The demand for services increased rapidly, and Linda realized they needed a more robust organizational structure. They hired specialized consultants to help manage the nonprofit more efficiently. "We need to make sure we are prepared for the future," Linda said during a meeting with the team. "Our work is just beginning, and we have to be ready for anything." Julia, always by Linda's side, took the lead in many of the new initiatives. She developed professional training programs for the women served by New Beginnings, helping them find jobs and rebuild their lives with dignity and independence. One of the beneficiaries of these programs was Clara, a woman who had escaped an abusive marriage with nothing but the clothes on her back. Clara was talented in sewing, but had never had the chance to develop her skills. With the support of New Beginnings, she received training and eventually opened her own tailoring shop. "You gave me more than a second chance," Clara said emotionally. "You gave me a new life." These success stories were a balm for Linda and Julia. Every achievement of the women they helped was a personal victory for them as well. However, not everything was rosy. There were moments of frustration and exhaustion. Linda especially felt the weight of responsibility and sometimes doubted her ability to continue. "Are we really making a difference?" she asked Julia one night, exhausted after a particularly tough day. "Linda, look at everything we've accomplished," Julia replied, holding her friend's hand. "Every life we touch, every woman we help rise up, is proof that we're on the right track." These words always revitalized Linda. She knew she wasn't alone, and that, with Julia by her side, they could face any challenge. Meanwhile, Robert was facing the consequences of his actions. The final sentence was 25 years in prison, with no possibility of parole before serving at least 15 years. Linda felt a mix of relief and sadness upon hearing the news. Relief because justice had been served, but sadness because a painful chapter of her life was finally closing. Determined to move forward, Linda focused even more on new beginnings. She decided to launch a new project, a welcoming center that offered not just shelter, but also medical care, psychological support, and educational opportunities. The center was inaugurated with great expectation. The ceremony was attended by many of the women who had been helped by the nonprofit, who shared their moving stories. "This center is a symbol of our commitment to every woman who needs help," Linda said during the inauguration. "It is a place where hope is reborn, and where each of you can find the strength to start over." New Beginnings continued to grow, but the true triumph of Linda and Julia was in the transformation of the lives they touched. Each woman who found support and strength in the nonprofit was a living testament to the power of resilience and solidarity. And so, Linda and Julia's journey continued, marked by challenges but also many triumphs, as they continued to spread hope and inspiration wherever they went. The inauguration of the New Beginnings Welcoming Center was a milestone in Linda and Julia's journey. The center, equipped with modern facilities and a dedicated team, quickly became a safe haven for many women. However, growth brought new challenges, especially in the administration and maintenance of daily operations. Linda knew they needed more support to sustain the pace of growth. She decided to organize a national conference on domestic violence, aiming to unite similar organizations and create a broader support network. Julia, as always, was by her side, helping coordinate the preparations. "We need to show that we're not alone in this fight," Linda said during a planning meeting. "There are so many organizations doing incredible work. If we unite, we can be even stronger." The conference was meticulously planned. Renowned speakers were invited, and workshops were organized to share experiences and strategies. When the day of the conference arrived, Linda felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. The event was a resounding success. Representatives from various nonprofits, activists, and survivors of domestic violence gathered to share their stories and knowledge. The atmosphere was filled with empathy and solidarity. During one of the panels, a survivor named Lisa shared her story of overcoming abuse, moving everyone present. "When I was taken in by New Beginnings, I was at rock bottom," Lisa said, tears in her eyes. "But the strength and support I found here gave me the courage to rebuild my life. Today, I am a different person, stronger and more hopeful." Lisa's words resonated deeply with everyone. Linda and Julia felt proud and moved, remembering why they had started New Beginnings in the first place. In addition to the lectures and workshops, the conference provided a valuable opportunity for networking. Linda and Julia established new partnerships with other organizations and secured promises of financial support and volunteers. After the event, Linda and Julia reflected on the impact of the conference. "I feel like we took a big step today," Linda said, smiling at Julia. "Not just for New Beginnings, but for all the organizations represented here." "I agree," Julia replied, "and I'm excited to see what we can achieve together." The conference also highlighted the need for advocacy and political change. Linda and Julia realized that in addition to offering direct support, it was crucial to work for systemic changes that could prevent domestic violence in the first place. They decided to launch a public awareness campaign and lobby for stricter laws against abusers and more resources for victims. With the help of lawyers and activists, they drafted a bill proposal and presented it to local legislators. The campaign gained traction quickly. Awareness events, peaceful protests, and meetings with politicians became part of Linda and Julia's routine. They secured support from influential public figures, increasing the visibility of the cause. Finally, after months of continuous effort, the bill was passed. It was a moment of victory for all domestic violence victims, and Linda and Julia felt their efforts were paying off. New Beginnings was no longer just a nonprofit. It had become a movement. Linda and Julia were more determined than ever to continue fighting for justice and equality, inspiring women to find strength and hope, no matter how dark the situation. And so, Linda and Julia's journey continued, marked by resilience and an unwavering will to make a difference. Together, they showed the world that even in the most difficult circumstances, courage and solidarity could transform lives and create a better future for all. As the years passed, New Beginnings solidified its place as one of the most respected and influential organizations in the fight against domestic violence. The impact of their work was felt not only locally but also in distant communities, inspired by their initiatives and programs. Linda and Julia were frequently invited to speak at international conferences and events, sharing their experiences and lessons learned. They had become prominent figures in the global movement for women's rights, their voices echoing the need for change and solidarity. However, despite all the success, Linda never forgot the true reason behind her fight. She always remembered her past, and the night she almost lost everything. This constant reminder motivated her to keep going, to never give up. One day, during a visit to one of the New Beginnings centers, Linda met Emily, her daughter, now a young adult. Emily had grown up witnessing her mother's transformation and the positive impact of New Beginnings. She had graduated in law with a specialization in human rights and was ready to join her mother's cause. "Mom, I want to help," Emily said determinedly. "I want to use what I've learned to advocate for the women who come to New Beginnings. I want to continue your legacy." Linda felt tears of pride filling her eyes. She embraced Emily tightly, feeling a deep gratitude for having her daughter by her side on this journey. "Emily, you don't know how much this means to me," Linda replied. "Together, we can achieve even more." With Emily on board, New Beginnings gained new energy. Emily brought fresh ideas and a contagious passion for the work. She helped organize free legal clinics and training sessions to empower the women to know their rights and defend themselves. Meanwhile, Julia continued to be the anchor of the organization, coordinating programs and ensuring that every woman who sought help received the necessary support. Her friendship with Linda was stronger than ever, and the two worked in perfect harmony, complementing each other in their skills and visions. New Beginnings also began developing prevention programs, working in schools and communities to educate about the signs of abuse and the importance of healthy and equal relationships. Linda believed that true change started with education, and these programs were a crucial part of her mission. One of the most memorable moments for Linda was when a young student approached her after a school lecture. "Thank you for everything you do, Mrs. Linda," the girl said, tears in her eyes. "My mother was helped by New Beginnings, and now we're living a new life, far from my abusive father. I want to be like you when I grow up." These words touched Linda deeply. She knew that every transformed life was a victory, and this gave her the strength to keep going. Looking to the future, Linda and Julia envisioned a world where domestic violence was eradicated, where all women and children could live in safety and dignity. They knew there was still much work to be done, but they were prepared to face any challenge. And so, New Beginnings continued to grow and thrive, a beacon of hope and an example of how courage, determination, and solidarity could transform lives. Linda, Julia, and now Emily together led a quiet revolution, building a promising future for all the women and children who crossed their path.